Chapter 33. Edia's Seed. Squall had attempted to leave the garden on his own to seek Edia. Not because he felt he had to, but simply because he forgotten the rules he himself had put in place. The garden was remaining stationary, waiting for Squall's orders to move, so they were still right beside the orphanage. In a way, right beside the birthplace of the garden itself. He would have really left on his own, too, if Selphie hadn't spotted him running towards the exit and ran off to tell Quistis. Because she did, he ended up having the two of them with him as he went down. Not that he really minded. He almost didn't even notice their presence as he ran for the entrance of the old orphanage he had been raised in. Edia was still out back with Headmaster Sid. Not even a single day had passed yet, so she was still in the same spot, going over the last few weeks. The two of them were standing together, hand in hand, looking out over the ocean and speaking quietly to themselves when Squall stepped through the open hole. Edia turned first and frowned at him. Not because she wasn't happy to see him, but because their earlier interaction was still weighing heavily in her stomach. A thick layer of guilt. Edia hadn't even met this Rinoa girl, and she had taken her from Squall. And the girl was obviously important to him. Sid had been telling her that Rinoa had changed their taciturn and withdrawn boy. And whatever Edia had done to her. Squall, she greeted calmly as he stepped in closer. His eyes no longer looked so lost. They were razor sharp and focused now. Is there anything at all I can help you with? The White Seed ship, Squall said without preamble. The one Elon's on. Oh, yes, Edia smiled gently. What about them? Where are they? Edia frowned. Those children are very cautious. They would never remain in one place for long. They know what happened to me, so they are actively avoiding me right now. As I told them to. It was for their own safety. I see, Squall frowned. So they could be anywhere in the world. That was a lot of ground to try to cover. Well, for Rinoa. Oh yes, Edia smiled. However, they seem to have taken a particular liking to Centra's landscape. I think because I myself liked it so and spent so much time down here when I was aboard. You were on board? Of course. Where do you think I disappeared to for over 10 years? Edia chuckled gently. If I know them as I think I do, I imagine they might have stationed their ship by an inlet somewhere on the Centra continent. I know that's not much, but... No, thank you. That narrows it down. To an entire continent. But if he was willing to search the globe for Rinoa, a continent was nothing. They tend to prefer rocky cliffs. Some place they can hide in. They're used to avoiding people. So I don't know how much luck you'll have. However, if you do find them... Edia turned to Sid and gestured with her hand. He pulled out his own inventory, a model a few years younger than Squall's, and pulled something out for her. Edia grabbed the white envelope in her hands and turned, passing it back to Squall. Please, take this letter that I wrote. It's an alert for them that I'm back to myself. With this, they'll know they can stop hiding and they shall welcome you. Squall reached out and took it from her hands. He nodded his gratitude and slipped it into the inner pocket of his jacket. Forgive me, Squall, Matron said sadly. I did not mean to hurt your lady. I know that, Squall frowned at the paper. Honestly, I'm not even sure if you did.
We can't figure out what's wrong with her. I just...
Quistis and Selfie shared a look behind his back. They wanted to reach out for him. Comfort him somehow. Yet, it felt like he was further from him than he had ever been before. Squall shook his head and faced the couple directly.
You know, both of you are more than welcome to return to the garden. I've already debriefed the students and staff of the truth.
Edia smiled at him.
Thank you, Squall. But no. I'd rather. If Ultimecia does possess me again, then it would be best to have you in the garden. If you're out here on your own, I can't keep you from making trouble. Come back with us. Both of you. You can stay on the 3rd floor. Students aren't permitted up there anyway. Edia.
Sid rubbed the back of her hand with his thumb.
Listen to Squall. Our boy has grown a great deal since you last saw him. I know that,
she smiled, pride shimmering in her eyes.
Very well, Squall. If you think it's best. I'd rather keep my distance though. You'll stay in my suite, then,
Sid told her.
No one but Sue or Squall will bother us. Right. Absolutely, matron,
Squall nodded.
You'll have all the peace you need. And a chance to change into clothes that aren't quite so...
He trailed off, unsure how to say it. Edia laughed, lifting the tattered edges of her destroyed, menacing gown. It wasn't like there was anything left in the old stone house to wear.
Of course. Lead on, my boy. I'll put my faith in you. "3 days. And nothing,"
Quistis frowned, lowering the binoculars.
This is getting ridiculous. Just how big is Centra anyway? Apparently, very big,
Sue said calmly, putting another mark on the map. She was keeping track of where the garden was going and where it had been. Nita, who had the garden's speed set almost as low as it could go and still move forward, was biting his tongue as he worked around the continent. Centra wasn't a large land mass, but it was rocky. There were a great many inlets, capes, and peninsulas all around the border. Not wanting to risk missing the White Seed ship, they were investigating each one as closely as the garden's size would allow.
"We might have to call off the search soon,"
Sue told the other two regretfully.
"What? We can't do that."
Nita shook his head at her.
"No way. Squall's counting on us." "I know. Hey, I want to find that ship just as much as you do. But we aren't going to find anything if the garden stalls in the water because we're out of power. That battle did damage, Nita. We need to get back to FH for repairs soon or we're going to start drifting again." "Damn!"
Nita grumbled. She was right, of course. But it felt too much like he was giving up, letting his commander down. Squall was different now. Everyone saw it. He didn't train anymore. He stopped teaching. People barely saw him. He was spending all his time in the infirmary. Watching over Rinoa. Waiting for her to wake up with the sort of desperation of a man clinging to a shipwreck in a storm. It just didn't feel right seeing Squall like this. So Nita had to succeed. He had to find that ship.
"All right. Let's just keep it up until nightfall. If we don't find anything by then, we'll make our way to FH for quick repairs then right back out here." "Of course,"
Sue nodded as Quistis brought the binoculars back up. They had been at it for 3 days now. They barely got any sleep. Finding the seed ship was important, not just to Squall, but to the world. Elone had to be kept safe for everyone's sake.
Doctor, I've finished organized the medicine cabinet,
Squall told her over his shoulder, gently shutting the doors of the large storage unit.
Oh, thank you, dear.
Drive Katawaki looked up from her paperwork.
I'm almost done here, then I'll go get us some lunch. Do you think you can get started on separating my iodine capsules? They've gotten all jumbled up lately because I haven't had time to organize them.
Sure, Squall nodded, moving over to that drawer on the wall. He was here all the time now anyway, he might as well make himself useful. Drive Katawaki's words, not his. Though he didn't much mind the chores she set him. As long as he could always look over and see Rinoa still resting in her room, the work was a nice way to pass the time. 3 days. 3 days and nothing. He knew better than to expect a miracle, but he was really hoping that finding that ship would be easier than this. He knew they would be on the move and that they were secretive, but he needed to find them. Despite her promise, Elone hadn't made any other attempts to contact him. He was waiting for it. For that shrill whistling that signaled the use of her power. He would welcome it if it meant the chance to speak with her again. But nothing. Things were too silent around him lately. All those years he had spent wishing for this silence, and now that he had it, he would do anything to get rid of it. If only Rinoa would wake up. He continued working around the infirmary through the afternoon. As promised, Drive Katawaki went and brought back lunch for them. Hot dogs for herself and nutrition bars for him. He had denied when she asked if he wanted to try to reserve them this morning. Unlike Zell, he was perfectly content eating the garden food. Honestly, everything tasted like ash lately anyway. Without Rinoa's voice lighting him up while he ate, everything was bland and tasteless. The sun was starting to sink before anything finally happened. Drive Katawaki was starting to close up the infirmary, locking him in because she was allowing him to sleep in the spare room at night to stay next to Rinoa. And Squall was pretending he actually did so when they both knew he would sleep on the stool in the corner of Rinoa's room instead. He was sweeping up the floor for her when the intercom dinged merrily overhead. He looked upwards as Quistis's voice, she sounded tired, echoed through the speaker.
Squall, please report to the second floor balcony. We're on approach to the VIII ship. Drive Katawaki. Go,
she smiled, already holding out her hand for the broom.
I'll keep an eye on her until you get back. Thank you,
he nodded to her and rushed out the door. Irvine and Zell were waiting for him when he got up to the exit onto the balcony.
Hey, we're your backup,
Zell grinned at him.
Hope you don't mind.
Squall nodded, walking past them and out the door.
Keep your weapons away. We're here peacefully. I don't want to start a fight.
Of course, Irvine grinned. His Bismarck was tucked safely out of sight. The three of them stepped outside. The balcony was overlooking the deck of the VIII ship. He could look over and see that 3 of them had already gathered at the bow. They were looking up at him suspiciously.
We're coming aboard,
Squall warned.
We're unarmed.
Putting his hand on the rail. He jumped, flipping himself over and down. Zell took the leap in one motion. Irvine vaulted over. The 3 of them landed neatly on the deck. Squall came up first and the leader of the VIII ship was looking at him through guarded eyes.
We meet again,
he said cautiously. The suspicion was clear. Squall didn't blame him. He had treated him the same way when they last met. Squall nodded to him.
My name. I am Commander Squall Leonhardt of Balam Garden, leader of the Seed Forces. I'd like to speak with your leader.
The man in front nodded.
I'm in charge here. My name is Weiss. State your business. Depending on what you have to say, I may ask you to leave immediately.
Squall and Weiss looked at each other carefully. Squall turned his words over in his head, weighing them carefully. Finally, he decided he didn't care. Just go for it.
I want to see Elone.
Weiss started. He looked over his shoulder at the female seed behind him. She gave him an unreadable look. All three seeds looked back at them. Their gaze wasn't exactly friendly.
We pose no threat,
Squall assured him.
We received information of your whereabouts from Edia herself.
Weiss and the other gasped.
Edia? How?
Squall nodded.
Edia is no longer under Sorceress Ultimecia's control. She is our ally once again. So there's no reason for you to hide Elone from us. We want to take her back to protect her from Ultimecia. I have access to a far larger force than you. I can assign more manpower to her safety.
The white seeds shared another long look. Weiss looked back to him, folding his hands in front of himself.
Thank you for coming and telling us. But we have no reason to believe you. Please leave.
Weiss turned on his heel and started back into the ship without waiting to see if Squall obeyed the command. It was that kind of carelessness that made Squall doubt the ability of these people to protect Elone. They were good at running and hiding, but little else. There was no way he was going to let Sis stay here under this thin layer of defense. He followed after Weiss confidently. The white seeds that they spotted along the body of the ship didn't attempt to stop him. He wondered if it was because they were sister seeds or because they didn't want to challenge him. He spotted Weiss walking down into the cabin at the prow of the ship. He followed him with single-minded determination. So much so that he didn't notice the other man coming down the steps from the helm until he called out.
Sir.
Squall and Zell, both recognizing the voice, jumped and turned. On the steps, Watts was grinning down at them with amazement.
Wow! Long time no see, sir. Zone, come here.
Watts finished coming down the steps. A moment later, Zone appeared at the top of the staircase as well.
What's up, Watts? Whoa! Look who's here!
Grinning, Zone came down the steps. He walked up to them happily, Watts just behind him.
Squall, man! How's it goin'? You're looking good. Can't believe you're here.
Watts nodded eagerly, waving at Zell.
Everybody doing good, sir. Hey, you two,
Zell waved to them.
What the heck are you doing here?
Zone laughed sheepishly.
Well, after you guys left Timber, those Galbadian buttheads came after us. We barely managed to escape to this boat. It was just good luck that it was even there. And they're so nice here. They took us on even knowing we're Galbadian fugitives. I was sure we were goners, sir.
Watts nodded quickly, snickering.
Zone went nuts and was thinking about swimming across the sea to escape. Seriously?
Zell dropped his head back, laughing.
Hey, it was a plan.
Zone defended himself, his cheeks burning red.
All you were doing was whining like a big baby. We're gonna die, we're gonna die. And who jumped in first? You. You numbnuts. I've never seen a grown man doggy paddle that fast.
Squall blinked at them. How on Gaia did these two keep surviving? Seriously, how lucky could a person be? Laughing good-naturedly, Zone looked back at Squall.
So, how's Rinoa? Where is she?
It was an innocent question. One he should have seen coming. Irvine cleared his throat awkwardly as Zell looked away uncomfortably. Squall's jaw tightened. He didn't want to tell them, but he owed them an explanation. Rinoa was their princess too.
Rinoa fought with us against Sorceress Edia,
he told them, looking away in his shame.
We were victorious. Whoa, seriously?
Zone gasped as Watts clapped.
Man, that's awesome. I knew you were good, I didn't think you were that good.
Squall and the others didn't celebrate with them. He didn't even look back at them.
We were victorious. But, for some reason, she went unconscious after the fight. What?
Zone's smile slipped slightly as he looked at him in confusion. Like Squall was speaking words he didn't quite understand.
She's resting in the garden right now. I don't know what happened. We couldn't protect her. I'm sorry. You son of a bitch.
Zone's fist grabbed the front of Squall's shirt.
Hey!
Irvine and Zell started forward but Squall held up a hand, keeping them back. Zone shook Squall, his face burning with fury.
What did I say? What did I say, hey? I told you to take care of her. I told you that nothing better happened to her. Scumbag!
Zone's fist was slammed across Squall's cheek. Squall didn't roll with it, allowing it to do more damage than it needed to.
You pathetic!
Bam!
Lion!
Bam!
Scumbag!
Bam! The last hit grazed Squall's cheek, not hitting him fully. Zone was already getting tired and Squall barely felt any pain at all. Zone pulled back again, fully intending on keeping going. Until Watts grabbed his elbow.
Zone, come on. Easy, sir. Easy. She's not dead. They just don't know what's wrong with her, that's all. Ain't that right, sir? Squall would never give up on her. Am I right, sir?
Watts looked at Squall, his eyes wide and full of sorrow. Unlike Zone, his immediate reaction wasn't one of violence. He was reaching for the hope of the situation. Not in the desperate, grasping way that Squall did, but in an honest and real way.
We came here to get Elone,
Squall said, his voice soft.
There's still someone after her and we want to protect her. And if I can get Elone and Rinoa together, maybe we can get Rinoa back.
Zone was shaking with the desire to punch him again. But Watts was smiling brightly.
Really? See, Zone. I told you, sir. Rinoa's gonna be fine. She promised she would come back. We all have to free Timber together. Don't worry, sir.
Zone continued glaring at Squall. The bob in his throat worked up and down as he ran Squall's words over in his head. Baring his teeth, Zone dropped Squall's shirt, pushing him back in anger.
All right. Fine. But I'm gonna say it one more time. If something happens to Rinoa again, I swear.
Zone couldn't finish. He shook his head before turning around and returning to the helm. Watts let out a long breath, looking between the two men.
I'm sorry about that, sir. Forget it,
he said calmly. It didn't even really hurt. Not nearly as much as Squall wanted it to. Watts bowed to him just slightly before running after Zone. Squall. Irvine frowned at him.
Forget it. Let's go. We still have work to do.
Squall continued forward towards the door to the cabin. Weiss turned as they came down, frowning to see they were still here. Squall was already pulling Edia's letter from his jacket before he said anything.
Here.
He held it out. Weiss looked down then up again. Cautiously, he took the envelope and ripped it open. With one hand, he pulled the letter out and unfurled it. Frowning at seeing the words, he touched the ink with shaking fingers.
This is Matron's handwriting. She really gave this to you.
Squall nodded once.
She told me you wouldn't trust us. She's back in the garden if that's not enough proof for you. But she wants to be alone for a while. I'm willing to grant her that, but if you must see her to believe us.
Weiss shook his head, reading the letter with a soft smile on his face.
This is Matron. I would recognize her words anywhere. You call her Matron too, hey?
Squall's mouth turned up slightly.
Yes. Ever since we were little. Matron saved all of us, brought us on this ship and gave us a family. She's important to us. We were raised by Matron, too. Fighting against her was difficult. But we're not seeds because we can't handle a battle. We're only lucky that everything turned out well. Most everything. Whatever happened, Edia is no longer possessed. She's back to her old self again. The kind matron who saved and raised us.
Weiss nodded, gently folding the letter back up. He put it into his uniform, right next to his heart. The relief on his face was readily visible as he held it close for just a second.
Squall. Commander Leonhardt, thank you. We owe you and Balam Garden much.
In respect and deference, Weiss raised his right arm, showing the back of his hand in the seed salute.
Even out salute is the same,
Squall mimicked him. Edia really was something else.
Matron told us that our sister seeds were very similar to us with a greater emphasis on battle while we're more based on stealth and speed. We don't have the same hierarchy as you, so I don't think we have your equivalent in title, Commander. However, I'm the eldest and so I'm mostly in charge when Edia isn't here. If I can do anything for you, I need to see Elone. Yes, of course. Well.
Weiss sighed, holding his hands behind his back.
I'm sorry. Elone's no longer with us. What?
Squall's heart fell. She wasn't here? No. She had to be here.
Where is she? Well, after we picked her up from your garden near the FH coast, we headed east to get as far away as we could from Edia. We were only following orders to protect her. Edia had promised us she would try to keep us safe, but Galbadia is a superpower. We only got so far before we encountered the Galbadian fleet. They weren't looking for us specifically. I don't think they knew about us. But they were under orders to stop everyone. There were a lot of them. Too many. We should have been more careful. I take the full blame for what happened. We fought off the ship who pulled alongside us and got away. But they pursued us in full force. We're far more familiar with the Centran coast though, and once we got here we were able to escape. Unfortunately, Immediately afterwards the ship broke down and left us stranded. There was no way we're going to let the Galbadians take Elon, of course. When they did find us again, we had no choice but to prepare for battle. What did you do?
Zell asked, in the grip of the story.
We did nothing,
Weiss shook his head.
As we were preparing to fight, forcing all the children and Elon into the cabin, an Star ship appeared. Of all the things. Star.
Squall started.
What do they have to do with this?
Weiss shrugged.
I don't know. We were left stranded as Star jumped into the battle. There were less of them, but they were better equipped. We were caught in the middle of it all. If I didn't know better, I would think that Star was defending us. Then, everything got really weird. Another Star ship, a smaller one, came up beside us. The Star soldiers came aboard and ordered us to evacuate onto their ship. They told us they would take us to safety. Of course we refused. We didn't trust them any more than the Galbadians. Of course,
Squall nodded. He wouldn't have trusted Star either.
They were trying to convince us when the tide of the battle began changing. Galbadia's numbers were starting to overwhelm them despite their superior tech. They were forced to leave or risk being sunk themselves. But, as they were pulling away,
Weiss paused as he thought back to the moment.
Elon ran to the bow. She climbed up onto the rail and yelled something out at them. I couldn't hear it over the battle and the waves. I started running over to get her off the rail when she jumped. She just jumped onto their ship. It wasn't like her at all. To this day, I don't understand why she did that. The small ship was fast. It ran from the battle quickly. The other ships started pulling back as well. They made sure to do it slowly though to keep Galbadia from attacking us instead. They drew them away from us. We've been here ever since trying to fix our engine. As soon as it's fully repaired, we plan on going to Star after her. I'm sorry, Squall, we couldn't protect her.
Squall shook his head. He had what he needed.
So Elon's in Star?
Weiss nodded.
We believe so. We can't let her stay there. What if she's in trouble?
Squall understood completely. But by the time Weiss got there, Squall fully intended on already having her in his hands.
Oh, man.
Nita ran his hand through his hair.
Xenophobic Star. That area's terrain is not really suited for flying the garden, Squall. And by that I mean I physically can't drive the garden there. Too mountainous, too many cliffs. The garden just won't go there.
Squall frowned, crossing his arms.
You make a good point. What do you recommend? Well, personally,
Sue spoke up,
I would recommend going to FH. Why?
Squall frowned at her.
Well, firstly, the garden needs repairs. We can't put it off any longer. But Elon. And you can apparently reach Star from FH. It's on the other side of the tracks. If you want to get into Star, you might have to walk, but it's better than nothing.
Squall nodded.
All right. Nita, set course for FH. Make it fast. Yes, Commander.
Nita saluted him. End of chapter.